Hello, I'm Steve Sherman, and welcome to this edition of Theater Thursday. In the month of November, we're going to be discussing The Open Hand by Robert Caisley, and today joining us is the playwright Rob Caisley.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Rob. So, again, I'm Steve Sherman. I was an MFA graduate of the acting program in 2016, and I actually got to originate the part of Jack in this awesome new play. And Rob, where are you coming from us today?
I live and work in Moscow, Idaho, the ancestral lands of the Nez Perce people. And I am the department chair and the head of playwriting at the University of Idaho.
Great. Well, I'm back in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee as a lecturer in acting, and we got to start this play in the Lab Theater at the Clarence Brown, and it was actually a 3-year workshop with my classmates and I. It surrounded the theme of generosity. Was that something that was your idea? I know originally you and Cal, our director, talked about an adaptation. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that was a very early conversation. Cal gave me a book to read, and we were thinking about adapting it. But very quickly, we decided that probably a more enjoyable experience for me as a playwright, and certainly I think a more educational and engaging experience for all of you in the program, was to originate a play, just to create something from scratch using the workshop as the basis for the story. And I began originally thinking about the topic of selfishness, but very quickly decided to turn that on its head and investigate the subject of generosity. And that's sort of where the play all began.
Great. And for the viewers who may not have been able to catch it a few years ago, could you tell us a quick plot of The Open Hand?
Yeah, it's about two couples in a large urban center, all kind of beginning their professional careers, and into their life comes a very wealthy philanthropist who starts doing very nice things for them financially, and also just has a large generosity of spirit. And as the play goes on, they all begin to wonder, what is this guy's agenda? And it turns out that he doesn't have an agenda. He just is a genuinely nice, generous guy.
Right. I'm glad you said that thing about agenda, because so much of that I think came up workshopping the play, and questions that we have in the story of the play is, why is this person being generous? As if we have to have a selfish reason behind generosity.
Yeah, exactly. I'd read about sort of like an informal social experiment where somebody walked around a college campus with dollar bills, a fistful of dollar bills, and just would approach people randomly and say, "Would you like a dollar?" And some people would take the dollar, but other people immediately were cautious. They would say, "No, I'm kind of running for class. I don't have time to talk to you." They just assumed that they needed to do a survey. There was some transactional, exchange that was taking place. And it turned out that this individual on any given day could not give away money to save their life. That people always attached some suspicion to the motives behind generosity.
Yeah, which is too bad, but also I think why it's so refreshing when we have stories or that when we hear stories about such genuine generosity and unselfishness.
Yeah.
I think it's why we so many theaters produce A Christmas Carol every year.
Exactly. Yeah. And I also knew that it was the essential energy that would hold the play together.
Yeah.
As the audience, because not only is this character, David Nathan Bright, generous, he's also very mysterious. I don't reveal a lot about his character. So I knew that the audience would be always wondering, well, when's the other shoe going to drop? What does he want?
Yeah. Well, and I've always heard great writers keep secrets. You have to give the audience a little bit, but don't give them everything. You want them to, and it helps that suspense that we want.
Exactly. Yeah.
We got to workshop this with you every year that I was in grad school. We worked on it together, and I remember first year you flew out and we actually told stories and played some games about generosity. Was that a new experience for you, working with a specific set of actors?
No, I had done it before, and actually Cal knew this, and knew that back in 1993 or 4, I think it was, I went to study in London at the Royal Court Theatre, and the Royal Court Theatre is probably the leading theatre of new writing in Europe, really. They pioneered a very specific method of writing plays called the joint stock method. And Cal wanted to have his students experience that process. And so it's where you bring in a playwright before you've determined what the subject is going to be. And then the group as a whole gets together and investigates the subject, and then the playwright goes away and writes a first draft of the play, and then comes back into rehearsal and begins to refine the play with that same group of actors through opening.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, were there specific stories from that first year that where characters or parts of the play came from?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's in many places in the play, it's hard to exactly map the trajectory from this idea in the workshop became this moment in the play. But I do remember a profoundly moving story that one of the members told about they had arrived in a big city. They had no friends, no infrastructure. They didn't know what they were doing. And an individual who was older and had some wealth and some influence took them under their wing, and how profoundly grateful this individual was because of that. And then a second story that I do see how it makes its way into the play was one of the members of the workshop talked about going off to college, and their mom, who didn't have a lot of means, gave them their only vehicle so that they could go to college. And that sense of sacrifice as they were starting their own journey toward independence, again, was very moving. And that worked its way specifically into the character of Todd in that case, and David Nathan Bright in the other example.
Yeah. Well, I loved working on new works. I was so thankful that I got to be a part of this new play as a writer or as an actor. I think there's nothing more exciting than starting with the idea and then seeing it all the way through to production. What's one piece of advice you have for young writers today?
I think probably the best piece of advice that I could give a young writer is to read. It's the best thing that you can do for yourself. It's better than any writing class that you will take. When you read, you learn all kinds of things, everything from spelling and punctuation and vocabulary to also what works on the page and what doesn't work on the page. So whether you're a playwright or a poet or a novelist, surrounding yourself with the great writers is the way that you learn how to do it yourself. And there is really no better shortcut.
I love that. And because there's so many distractions today, right, that
Absolutely.
We are always, there's always something to see. And with digital media, there's always something coming our way. And so it's a good reminder to take a step back and read a book at some point, which is probably, unfortunately, less and less common. So
yeah, I think so. Distraction seems to be what our lives are all about now, with notifications and constant news feeds. And the one thing you need to be a writer is you need uninterrupted, undisturbed, focused time.
Mm-hmm. Now, how about when it comes to the writing itself? If you have an idea, you have some characters and relationships, you kind of know point A, point B. What would you say to a young writer who's starting to write their first full-length play?
After you've written your first draft, go back and cut about 20% out of it. because you will have overwritten it. And the reason
Yeah.
you've overwritten it is the temptation to stray from the plot.
Yeah.
You've got to keep on the plot. And by plot, I mean constantly be telling the audience what happens next. So even though that story about when you got a puppy when you were a child is very moving to you, it defeats from the purpose of,
Right.
the main trajectory of the story.
Right. Everything has to have a cause and effect action moving
Exactly.
forward.
Yeah.
Rob, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that advice, and thank you so much for joining us today. Go out and buy a copy of The Open Hand. Thank you to Rob. Thank you to the viewers, and I will see you next time.